Welcome to our City Council meeting on the 6th of July. We will start out with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will have Council Member Beach please say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you're able, please stand and join me with your hand over your heart just after this Independence Day weekend and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. We will now go into roll call. Megan.
Councilmember Beach.
Here.
Councilmember Coulson.
Here.
Councilmember Brownrigg.
Here.
Vice Mayor Ortiz.
Here.
Mayor O'Brien.
Here. All right, Michael, do we have a report out from closed session?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Burlingame City Council met in closed session on the item listed on the closed session agenda. There is no reportable action. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All right, next will be the events. We will have our, we'd like you to join us in drawing district lines for the city of Burlingame. So we will be having a community workshop on July 21st at 6 p.m. This will be by Zoom. The city will hold 2 workshops this summer on how to use the mapping tool and what criteria are taken into consideration when drawing the district lines. We'll also answer any of your general questions about the transition. So if you want more information, please go to the www.burlingame.org/district-elections, or you can actually email our city clerk, and that's mhasselshire@burlingame.org, and I'll spell that. It's MHASSELSHEARER@burlingame.org. We are also have a vacancy on the Storm Drain Citizens Oversight Committee. So we encourage people to apply for that position. Completed applications can go to sbrewer, BREWER, @burlingame.org. Just a reminder, we do have our farmers market both on Sundays and Thursdays. The Sunday hours are 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and the Thursday hours are 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. I also want to let people know that we'll have our El Camino Real Roadway Renewal Project virtual meeting, and that will be on Wednesday, July 14th from 5:30 to 7:30. You can go to www.elcaminorealproject.com for more information. We also have a couple items through the Park and Rec Department. We have on Wednesday, tomorrow, July 7th at 2 p.m. Via Zoom is the Memory Cafe. You can call 650-558-7300 for sign-up information. We also have drop-in ping pong at the Rec Portables every Tuesday from 10:15 to 1 o'clock. That's new. I never knew we did that. So that sounds like fun. And then this Friday at 6 p.m., please join us at Washington Park to listen to the House Rockers. Friday, July 16th at 8:30 in Washington Park, we will be showing the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So those are the events that I have at this time. Is there any other events, or are there any other events that my colleagues would like to bring up that I may not have mentioned? Okay.
I have one coming up. San Mateo County Historical Association is going to be sponsoring the History Makers Dinner. The honoree this year is Joe Cutchett. The MC is Congresswoman Jackie Spear. I'm co-hosting the event, very exciting. And if you're interested in attending, it will be on September 10th at Filoli. So I only mention it this early because when we get back, it'll be pretty close and potentially sold out. So hopefully, if you're interested in going, you can pop on the San Mateo County Historical Association website and you can purchase tickets.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Councilmember Brownrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And it may be that staff corrects me on this, but the briefing by Caltrans for the public hearing on El Camino Real renewal, I believe there are 2 dates. Did you mention 2 dates? And so it's a little confusing. There's one on the 14th and one on the 16th. One is virtual and one is in real time. At least that was the plan the last I heard.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
so the virtuals on the 14th, in person is Friday, July 16th from 5:30 to 7:30, and that's at Burlingame High School.
Right. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, if not, we will move forward to our presentations this evening. We have one, and this is the city recognition of Carol Augustine, who will be retiring in the next couple weeks, I think. She will definitely be missed. So Carol, I'm trying to view you. Are you on camera?
Yes.
There you are. Okay. So we have a proclamation for you. So of course, we are honoring our finance director, Carol Augustine, upon her retirement. Whereas Carol Augustine began her career in finance as a supervising state auditor in the Texas State Auditor's Office, and then worked as an accounting manager for a medical center in Atlanta before moving to California. She moved to the Bay Area in 1988 and joined the City of Palo Alto Finance Department, where she served as accounting manager for 7 years, and then became the finance director for the town of Los Altos Hills, where she worked for 6 years. She served as the finance director for the city of Cupertino for 3 years and the city of Menlo Park for just over 8 years. Then she decided to join us here in the city of Burlingame as our finance director since March 2013, and was city manager Lisa Goldman's first hire. During which Ms. Augustine's tenure in Burlingame, she developed a general fund reserve policy, set up retiree medical and pension trust funds, balanced 9 budgets in both good economic times and bad, and oversaw the production of 8 award-winning comprehensive annual finance reports. She also was instrumental in the development of the Measure I sales tax, managed numerous bond issuances and refundings, served as a key member of the South Bayside Waste Management Authority's Technical Advisory Committee, and wrote the most comprehensive staff reports in the history of the city of Burlingame. She has been an invaluable member of the city's department head team, all of whom will miss her willingness to assist them with any financial challenge, her good humor, her expressive hand gestures, and her joy when she talked about and bought many gifts for her 3 grandbabies. And she and her husband, Webb, are retiring to wine country, where she will be able to enjoy beautiful vineyard views from the balcony of her new home and many glasses of Chardonnay. So therefore be resolved, the City Council of the City of Burlingame does thereby commend and thank Finance Director Carol Augustine for her many years of dedicated service to Burlingame, and congratulations on your well-earned retirement. And I'm sure my colleagues will have a few words to say, but I'd actually like to start maybe with our city manager, Lisa Goldman.
Put me on the spot. So thank you, Mayor O'Brien. Carol is probably going to kill me for putting this on the agenda because I snuck it on after our last agenda meeting, so she didn't know it was happening. And I hope I captured just a fraction of the many things that you've done for us over 8.5 years. It was my honor to hire you away from Menlo Park from my good friend Alex, who cursed me for a while when I stole you away. And I feel so fortunate that I was able to get somebody with your vast experience and your knowledge of all things finance, and not just finance, the accounting side, but also the budget and policy sides. And you have been my partner for all these years. We came in together with our former city attorney, Kathleen Kane. We all started within a few months of each other. And we changed things for the better. We implemented a lot of new programs and policies and got us into trust funds and just did all sorts of really good things. Whenever anybody comes in with fresh eyes, they find things that the prior incumbent didn't have a chance to get to. And so you got to a lot in your 8.5 years here. And I just can't thank you enough for coming to join us, for making me laugh all the time, and your colleagues on the department head team. You just cracked us up all the time. I hope you will send me videos of the grandbabies and the grand doggies also, whom I love. And I just wish you all the best, you and Webb. Your house is beautiful. I look forward to visiting, and I know you will have a glass of wine for me when I make it up there. So thank you, Carol. I will truly miss you. I can't even tell you how much, but I will see you in person to give you a big hug. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I will miss the executive team as well. Great team to work for. The privilege has been all mine. Thank you.
Colleagues, I'll let you just jump in.
Well,
you
I'll
wanna go?
start, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor, just very quickly. Some have worked closer with you, Carol, on finance committees, but I just felt such peace of mind that you were at the helm with your skill, your integrity, and your experience. Thank you so much for your incredible work. We will miss you very, very much.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I could, I just want to say thank you. All the way back from my first council run, you answered all my stupid questions and took the time to explain things. And again, with humor, what everybody's saying, I really appreciate it. You've done an outstanding job. Our audits have always been impeccable. And it's been really an honor and a pleasure working with you. And I will miss you a lot. Thank you for everything, Carol.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and go, which is Carol, I have to say, I've so enjoyed working with you because it's a rare person that I find that likes to geek out with me on all the pension stuff. And so I kind of found my little pension soulmate here in the city, and I've really enjoyed working with you. And one thing I really appreciate about you is that whether it's another agency calling, PCE, CCAG, the flood and sea level rise district, they always come to Burlingame. They consider us to be really sort of top of the totem pole and top of the highest quality. And I appreciate how willing you are to share your background and your expertise with all the other agencies and cities around here. It sets the bar really high, and I'm just so proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I'll, from my point of view, Carol, I think the nicest thing you said last time as we were talking about the budget and we previewed some of these comments is that you have found Burlingame a place that's willing, and the city council willing, to think about the long term. And I really appreciate that, because I think too often elected officials are cleaning up the messes of prior regimes that weren't thinking about the long run, that were just thinking about getting votes today. And I know I speak for every one of the council members, both on the dais today and in the past, how much we appreciate you being willing to, not only willing to take the long run look, but able to take the long run look. And it's because we put ourselves in that position that we're then able to protect services in one of the worst, or in your tenure, one of the worst downturn by far. And we barely missed a beat in terms of delivering services from a financial point of view. So I'm really grateful for that. And I also just want to call out Director Augustine's enormous contributions on the South Bay Waste Management Agency, where she has served both on the TAC committee, but more importantly, from my point of view, served as one of the 5 members of the finance subcommittee, sitting right with electeds together, helping us plot the financial future of an agency that takes care of over 100,000 homes. And thanks to Carol's work and frankly, her diligence, we were able to refinance old bonds, saving taxpayer money, and in actually making funds available to reinvest in the garbage facility for the future. So that kind of creativity and guts, and finally, as we all know, the best finance people are not people who say yes all the time. And you've had to say no along the way to various things, and yet you've always done it. And I think this is why you have the respect of your peers. You do it in a way that isn't patronizing or haughty. It is just matter of fact, and when you need to, you hold the line. And I think we all really appreciate that, even if sometimes we'd like to spend a little more here and there. You've been very good at making sure we keep our eye on the long run. So thank you so much for all these years of really putting Burlingame in a really great position. Thank you.
Indeed, getting the council of any municipality or governmental entity to look long-term is half the battle. So I was very relieved in coming to the city that the entire council was on board with looking long-term and not over the next fiscal year only. So thank you for that.
Well, I would like to thank you, Director Augustine, for all your work over the years. It's just been a pleasure working with you. You've always had Burlingame's interest at heart, and I've always enjoyed your calm demeanor in good times and in bad times. You've just carried yourself well, and I love the way that you were able to kind of put all those financial reports in simple layman's terms so everyone could understand it. And that in itself is a special quality. And so I really do hope you enjoy your retirement. You have definitely earned it, and the city of Burlingame is really going to miss you, and it's going to be extremely difficult to fill your shoes.
Well, let me assure you, in addition to a great executive team, you have a very good finance team established, and they've been working so hard on getting the new system implemented. I've really got to hand it to them. And my successor is also very experienced, and I'm sure she will do a great job in leading what is an excellent finance team in the future. So thanks.
Thank you again, Director.
Yeah.
All right, next we have public comments. So members of the public may speak about any item not on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to suggest an item for a future council agenda may do so during this public comment period. The Ralph M. Brown Act prohibits the city council from acting on any matter that is not currently on the agenda. So I have Sandra Lane.
Mayor O'Brien, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Honorable Mayor O'Brien and council members. First of all, before I'm going to say what I came to say tonight, I want to just say that I was never quite aware, actually, of the tremendous work that Director Augustine has done. And I've been to a few meetings, but I want to just, not just, but echo the fact that I feel a great sense of comfort to know during all these years that there's been a stable, experienced hand at the financial ship of this city. So what a resume, I'm just, it's quite wonderful to know. We all know, I'm going to shift a little bit, that we all know that the wildfire season is upon us. I don't need to remind anybody really of that. So I wanted to just say tonight, I have 3 points that I thought would help bring some kind of immediate investment in public safety. My first one is really more of a question, is to ask what preparations have been made or will be made regarding cooling centers. I brought this up before, but I think it's really critical that we have a designated plan for cooling centers during these heat waves, which appear not to, they look as though they're going to continue. The second point that I think would help, and I think it would probably help our first responders, is whether or not, and maybe we do have a long-range plan, but I'd like to know if we have a long-range plan for evacuation routes for any particular disaster. I think my third point is one that's commonly talked about in a lot of urban interface areas, is more stronger messaging to the public about clearing and cutting brush. So I'm going to let it go at that, but there's a lot of terminology, but in plain old-fashioned common sense ways of saying it, we really need to reinforce with our residents that's how important it is to keep brush and any trees that they can cut away would go a lot towards our public safety. So thank you very much. And nobody likes to talk about disasters, but I just think it's really necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, Megan, any emails for public comment?
Yes, I received one email from Manito. He says, the way the signals are timed are either, wait, I started halfway through the email, sorry. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Honorable Council. I'd like to urge you to please look at the timing of the signal on Burlingame Avenue in Primrose. That's the old David's Tea, Melton Joe, and the Juice Corner. The way the signals are timed are either causing congestion or compounding already bad congestion on weekends. A signal timing change was made recently to give pedestrians a head start by taking green time away from the app. That seemingly slight reduction in green time is enough to cause cycle after cycle backups and queues to build on the avenue. One left turning driver or even right turning driver holds up the rest of the traffic. Even before this change, it's curious that the signal is timed to show more green time to Primrose than it is to the Ave. Usually the green times are roughly proportional to the amount of traffic on each street. This one is the reverse. At any rate, I'm not opposed to the pedestrian head start, as that is a welcome safety feature, but the whole signal timing arrangement should have been reviewed to mitigate this change. The amount of green time for all approaches should have been increased. Increase the pie and make everyone better off. After all, there is always a way to do pedestrian safety and still move traffic. I hope you improve this intersection, particularly once the traffic really comes back and before the new garage fully opens. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. All right, on that note, we will move forward to the approval of the consent calendar. Is there any of my colleagues that would like to pull an item off? You can raise your hand. Okay, doesn't look like it. I will open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to pull an item off? Please raise your hand. Okay, doesn't look like it. Megan, is there anyone that emailed to pull an item off?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you. So if I can have someone make a motion, please, for items 8A through 8M.
Madam Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
So we have a motion from Councilmember Beach for approval of items 8A through 8M with a second by Vice Mayor Ortiz. Megan, can we have a roll call there?
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Clarkson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownridge,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Okay, we do not have public hearings this evening, so we will go on to item 10, which is staff reports and communications. And our first item is item 10A, which is the adoption of the ordinance repealing and replacing chapter 25.77 of title 25 of the Burlingame Municipal Code and adding chapter 12.11 to title 12 of the Burlingame Municipal Code. Let's see, of the Burlingame Municipal Code, CEQA determination exempt pursuant to state CEQA guidelines sections 15378, 15061 B3, 15302, 15303, and 15304. And just let the council know, we are taking the resolutions separate from the ordinance. So we'll start out first with the ordinance. And so our city attorney, I think, will be going forward with the staff report.
Madam Mayor, Assistant City Attorney Scott Spanswell will give the staff presentation. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And we do have Gail Karish here as well. She is now a panelist. And I'm going to set up my screen. Megan, am I able to share the screen?
Now you should be able to.
Thank you very much. All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. As you just mentioned, the next item is the second reading of the city's proposed update to our wireless ordinance, which, as you mentioned, again, would amend chapter 25.77, repeal and replace it of the Burlingame Municipal Code, which is our current wireless communications facility code. And it's going to add a new chapter 12.11, which would govern wireless facilities in the public right of way. During the ordinance's introduction, I wanted to start with a quick roadmap of the item. As you can see, we're not going to be going over the legal framework since that was already covered during the introduction. Of course, any member of the public can see that on YouTube or on the City Council agenda website. Rather, we're quickly going to go over procedure and then we'll move on to any questions of the staff. So what is the City Council being asked to consider? As you'll remember in the first reading, this was a long slide. This time, it's just the ordinance itself. The proposed resolutions, as the mayor mentioned, as well as the municipal facility license agreement, will be addressed during the next agenda item. So this is just the ordinance that we're talking about right now. So staff was able to have some productive meetings with the individual carriers over the last 2 weeks between the first reading and now. And those meetings did result in changes being made to the design standards resolution and the license agreement. The staff did not make any changes to the ordinance, and the language you see here tonight is the same that was presented to you for consideration 2 weeks ago. However, since this was a comprehensive update, we also wanted to let you know that staff intends to brief the City Council about the implementation of the update, including this ordinance and the next item, all the accompanying resolutions and the license agreement, in approximately 6 to 9 months. This will allow staff to analyze any unexpected issues that arise from the implementation and potentially recommend amendments to address those issues should they come up. So our recommendation for this item, all we're asking is that you conduct a public hearing, and then we recommend that by motion you adopt the proposed ordinance and direct the city clerk to publish a summary of the ordinance within 15 days of adoption, and further that you direct staff to come back in approximately 6 to 9 months to provide you an update of how it's going. And that is it for this update here. And as I mentioned, we do have Gail Karish available, and as well as Planning Manager Ruben Huron and myself are here to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Deputy City Attorney. Does anyone have any questions? Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm sure this is should be clear to me, but I just want to make sure I have it right. So this part of the conversation is not about location standards or some of the other specific items that we discussed and that you redlined. That's for the next agenda items. Have I got that right?
Yes, that is correct. Essentially, this is the bare bones that sets up the other documents, which it then references. So the reason that this is done too is so we're able to more easily adapt to the changing technology through resolution changes rather than bringing an ordinance back for a complete overhaul and update and everything that goes along with it. We're able to move a little more with a little more agility this way.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, then I will open it up to public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make any comment? Okay, it doesn't look like it, so I'm going to close that public hearing, but ask our city clerk if anyone has emailed.
No, I haven't received any emails.
Okay, so then on that note, can we?
Madam Mayor, there is a hand up.
Okay, Ginbar Katima, please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good evening, Mayor O'Brien, members of City Council. My name is Ginbar Katem. I'm with Verizon Wireless. I just wanted to speak on this item. Actually, I'm not sure if I should hold my comment for 10B, but I did have comments on the resolution, but I think we're just on the ordinance now.
Yes, if it's on the resolution, that will be the next item. So if you would like to wait until 10B, we'll be there shortly.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm closing the public comment on item 10A. Back to my colleagues. Would anyone like to, well, first of all, does anyone have any comments? And if not, someone like to make a motion?
Madam Mayor, after you.
No, I was ready to make a motion, so.
I was, if you don't mind, Vice Mayor, I'll make a motion in part because I'd like to reiterate to the public, thank you, that the council has been working to make sure that we hit the right balance between telecommunications access and aesthetic developments within Burlingame for a very long time. And there will be a number of our residents who are disappointed with some of the simplifications that this whole approach creates for telecommunications companies to access our public streets. And I just want to remind the public as we make this motion that this was a council that took on big telecom years ago when we thought that they were overstepping, and we actually prevailed. At this point, the legislative context is so different, and the way wireless communications are going is so different that we're in the position today where we are in terms of having to make this simpler and more streamlined. And with that explanation, I then want to make a motion to introduce this ordinance for adoption. Thank you.
And I'd love to second.
So we have a motion made by Councilmember Brownrick, seconded by Vice Mayor Ortiz. Any comments before we go to the vote? Okay, Megan.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrick,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, so motion passes 5-0. Now on to 10B, which are the, that contains.
And Madam Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that motion, we also want to direct the city clerk to publish a summary of the ordinance as well.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Does that require a motion?
That does not require a motion.
No, it does not require a motion. Okay, our city clerk knows, right? We'll just go by our deputy city attorney. All right, item 10B. So this is where we will be discussing there's 3 resolutions. So actually my question to our deputy city attorney is, do we take these resolutions separately, or can we do it all as one once we go through public comment and questions and comments from my colleagues?
So Madam Mayor, you're actually going to take this as a single item, so you can talk about all 3 together. However, at the end, we're going to ask that you make 3 separate motions, 1 motion for each resolution. So you can certainly talk about them together. They are interdependent, but we want to make sure that there's a separate record approving each resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So will you start out with the staff report?
I will. Thank you very much. And I will start sharing my screen again. All right. Can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Great. So now we have moved to the resolutions portions of our wireless update. And for this item, we're also going to have a quick procedural note because, as the mayor just noted, this one is a little bit more complicated. Then we're going to look over the changes that were made to both design location standards and the Form Municipal Facility License Agreement. And I will note that these are the only 2 documents that underwent any changes from the last meeting. And we're going to move on to any questions of staff. For this item, staff recommends that the City Council take a look at each of the proposed resolutions. This includes the resolution establishing design and location standards for wireless facilities, the resolution approving the form of the MFLA for small cell wireless facilities, which also includes looking at the form of the MFLA itself, which has been included for you, and the resolution establishing a deposit for wireless permit applications under Chapter 12.11 and establishing a fee for wireless permit applications. As you noted, the City Council can consider these items as a package because they're all interrelated. However, staff is ultimately going to ask that you make 3 separate motions, 1 for each of the resolutions. Since the form of the MFLA is actually approved through one of the resolutions, you don't actually need to take any action on it specifically, so it's just going to be action on the 3 resolutions. And the first, as you remember from our last meeting, is going to be the design and location standards resolution, which is going to adopt design and location standards for wireless facilities in the public right-of-way and utility easements and on public and private land. And it also establishes standard permit conditions for those facilities. This includes design and location requirements for wireless facilities that are placed in the utility and light poles as well. City Council made numerous comments on this document at our last meeting, and staff also received comments from the individual carriers as well. Many changes were ultimately made to address those comments, and Planning Manager Ruben Huron is here to walk us through the most significant changes that were made. With that, Ruben, I will pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Scott, and good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Since the June 21st City Council meeting, staff has made several substantive changes to the design and location standards resolution to address concerns expressed by the council and individual carriers. This evening, I will only cover the main changes. A document reflecting all of the track changes was provided to you as an exhibit in the staff report. To address your concerns regarding graffiti, staff added language that all wireless facilities should be constructed or coated with graffiti-resistant materials. In addition, it requires graffiti to be removed within 5 days from the time the carrier is notified, unless an extension is granted by the city for good cause. Regarding location preferences, the previous version of the location standards only included a location preference order for private and public land. In this current version, you will see that there is now also a location preference order for wireless facilities in the public right-of-way and within utility easements. This location preference details the council's desired location for wireless facilities, and it includes a higher preference for parks and open space and a lower preference for schools and licensed daycare facilities. To maintain aesthetically pleasing views from living areas, the location standards state that wireless facilities should be located near shared property lines between 2 adjacent lots, whenever technically feasible, or along a secondary street frontage. This would help move them away from being placed directly in front of homes whenever possible. Staff would note that of the 5 facilities that we've had installed so far, 4 of those locations meet this condition. Lastly, to address any noise emitted from wireless facilities, staff clarified that additional space may be given to accommodate a passive cooling system, which does not require fans. This would result in a quieter operation of the facility. We would also know that the 5 facilities that have been installed incorporate a passive cooling system and do not emit any sound. So those are the main changes, and at this time, I'll pass it back to Scott. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruben. We'll go quickly through the rest. Obviously, the main changes were on the document that Ruben just briefed you, the design and location standards. But we also want to make sure that we do a quick brief of the other resolutions that we'll be talking about today. First is the resolution for new wireless pieces.
Before we move forward, Deputy
Sure.
City Attorney, will it be easier if anyone has questions, we do it with each resolution?
You can certainly do that, Madam Mayor.
Okay. I do have actually one question. So if we go back a slide to the 70, they have 5 days to clean up any graffiti. So my question is, if it's not removed within the 5 days, can we impose a penalty, and can that be incorporated in the ordinance?
So I will pass that over to Ms. Karish. The way we've written it, we would be able to fix the graffiti ourselves, I believe. If Ms. Karish wants to correct me, she certainly can, though. But a penalty would be harder to enforce, and I'll let her speak about why.
Thank you, Scott. You kind of threw me with that question. I wasn't expecting that I was going to have to answer that. It's sort of it's not really a telecom question per se. It's more of just a code enforcement kind of question, or permit condition enforcement sort of question. So I think that if the main goal is to get the graffiti removed, then probably a better solution than a fine. We were thinking is to just get it removed and to charge that to the permittee, rather than to try to fine them to enforce the change. But I'm just trying to find the condition.
Okay, so that is incorporated then, that the city, if it's not cleaned up, the city can do it, and then we just get reimbursed.
Yeah, so that's what I was, sorry, Gail, that's what I was trying to pass over to you, because I forget the exact language. As Gail mentioned.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. It's in 21. And I actually don't see that it made it in there. Is it in there? Wireless. So it's in permit condition 21C, kept free of graffiti, shall be removed within 5 business days unless the city extends the time for good cause. So.
Right, but it doesn't look like it says anything about being reimbursed if we're cleaning it up.
Right.
So I'd like to see that added.
It may be, is it, Scott, that it's added in, oh, I know where it may be. It may be in the municipal facility license agreement.
I think it may be as well.
Because here we're talking about facilities that may not actually be on property that you could access to clean up, because these are conditions for maintenance generally. So this could even apply to a building rooftop, I believe, or a utility pole. So it may be, yeah. So that, I think where we put it was definitely where the facilities are owned by the city.
Okay, so let's just double check that it's in there. I was actually looking at the 21C and didn't see it. So if it's somewhere else, that's great. I just want to make sure it's somewhere before we vote on this.
But I think if we don't have the word graffiti in the license specifically, there's a general obligations to comply with permits and things like that. And if they don't comply, then we can go in under certain circumstances, the city could go in and correct the non-performance.
Which is fine, but I want to make sure that the city is reimbursed.
Yes, oh yeah. And
Because there's
it
a
would be-
potential of a lot of these being installed. And so, I don't want all this extra time of our staff being utilized to clean all this up, and then there's no reimbursement policy.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much everything that happens under the license agreement, if the city has to go in and do something, then you can get reimbursed for it. So I just want to make sure that it says that.
Thank you, Ms.
For
Karish.
the graffiti, the permit conditions.
Okay, Councilmember Brownray, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I want to thank City Attorney and staff for listening to our last conversation. And I did read the red line and I saw a lot of our collective concerns addressed, and I appreciate that, appreciate the changes. I remain concerned that the approach overall that we're adopting, where we basically set up preferences, sounds good on paper, but I wonder how valuable it's really going to be, because I think it's so easy for somebody to say, well, that just wasn't our preference. We couldn't manage there. And in particular, the concern I have is about the nearness to homes, which I think is an aesthetic issue. And we discussed last time, or I discussed last time, the potential of putting a 20-foot limit. Like you couldn't put one of these within 20 feet of, livable space, not property lines, but livable space. And I wondered, obviously that was not included here, and I'd like to understand staff's thinking about that.
So staff certainly considered that comment. We were doing our best to balance the technical infeasibility and the council's comments. And on that, I'll let Ruben speak a little bit. We felt that a lot of this could be covered through the shared property line language that's actually going to keep those poles away. And I know you're talking about a general prohibition 20 feet away, but we also don't want to put ourselves in a place where we are granting waivers on a basis to carriers because we have to, because that's the only place that something can go. So we're trying to do our best to balance those there. And we felt that the 20 feet comment was best captured by making sure that we control the placement by encouraging the carriers and putting that location preference where we're very strong on the shared property line. But Ruben, you might be able to speak a little better as to the practicality of that and about how far that would typically keep these poles away from livable space.
Sure. Yeah, so in our location preference order or location guidelines, we are going to be encouraging that the wireless facility carriers really do look at those poles that are, if you look at the shared property line and extend that into the public right of way, to put them on those poles, because that'll take them further away from homes, because when you factor in the side setback and the front setback, it gives you that couple extra feet. In most cases, second floors are typically located 15 to 20 feet. I mean, the minimum requirement now for a second story addition is 20 feet from property line. Then you have a couple more feet of right-of-way areas. So in most cases, we're going to get probably 20 feet or even more than 20 feet, given those setback requirements. But really encouraging them to be placed on poles that are kind of in between two properties will help give you a couple more extra feet. So we thought that would accomplish that.
So I appreciate the sort of pragmatic approach and hoping for the best, but I'm not convinced we can't be more prescriptive, that we can't just say it has to be 20 feet. And I guess I wonder why we don't do that.
Sure. Perhaps look to Gail if there's any guidance on that in terms of specifying a number of feet and making sure that it's still feasible for a carrier to do.
Just to point out, I mean, we felt it was okay to say you can't be within 300 feet of another wireless carrier's facility. So we obviously do feel comfortable setting physical limits, So anyway, over to you, Gail. Thank you.
Thank you. So to the extent that it's really a matter of how many facilities or locations it might take off the table in terms of availability. And so that was the attempted assessment. There would be, that's the assessment. There's no hard and fast rule about, this amount of feet is okay, that amount is not. In any challenge to rules on placement, what a carrier would want to challenge it would probably be looking at the cumulative impact of all of the requirements and whether that leaves them still with locations to place their facility. So it's hard to answer in a vacuum. I just know that in cities where there have been a lot of different sorts of requirements, some carriers have done the analysis and come back and like sued the city and said, okay, the cumulative impact is you basically take in 90% of your city off the table. I don't think we're at that position here. But that's the best we can do. I mean, in terms of trying to give an explanation, I think one approach would be to try some sort of limitation and see how that plays out in practice and whether that would require an adjustment because it is too strict. That's one possibility.
Thank you very much. And I'll hand back the microphone, except to say that I really appreciate that candid answer. And for me personally, I'd rather put the onus on the industry to show us that it can't work rather than the current approach. So, but thank you for that clarification.
So to dovetail on that, then, out of curiosity, of I think it's 5 that have been placed at this point, are they all 20 feet or farther? Or are any of them less than the 20-foot distance that Councilmember Brownrick has brought up?
That's, we don't have that information. I can certainly try to look that up and measure those distances. These installations weren't, we have site plans. I'm not sure if they show the location of the structures near them. But, in future cases, we can definitely ask them to show the location of the structure in proximity to the carrier.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions before we move on to the next resolution? Okay. All right, let's move on to the next resolution.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you all for the good questions here. So the next resolution is one that has not been changed, and that is briefed exactly the way it was 2 weeks ago. And that's the resolution establishing a deposit and new wireless fees. So this resolution does establish a deposit for $1,000 for Public Works to request of applicants before review of their applications under the new Chapter 12.11. The city chose to establish a deposit rather than a fee, just to make sure that we don't run afoul of the FCC's requirement that a fee not exceed a city's reasonable costs. With a deposit, obviously, it is exactly our reasonable costs. Should the deposit be depleted, the city will require reimbursement before any additional work is done. The resolution also creates a new wireless permit appeal fee of $600, which will be collected when a party appeals a director's decision on a wireless permit application. The $600 fee is inclusive of noticing costs and related to the appeal. And as Councilwoman Colson noted last time, it's a single fee to get a hearing. So more than one person could be at that hearing for that $600 fee. So that is the brief recap of this resolution. Happy to answer any questions on it.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, if not, let's move to the next one.
Thank you. The final resolution is this one. That's we're asking you to approve. It's regarding the form of the municipal facility license agreement for small cell wireless facilities that are going to be installed on our city-owned poles. The resolution allows the city manager to execute the agreement and to make adjustments to finalize it with the concurrence of the city attorney if necessary. What that means is if there needs to be minor adjustments as this goes through, if the city manager and city attorney agree, those adjustments could be made based off the form that was approved today by City Council. We'll speak really quickly about some of the key terms of the agreement, which remain unchanged, and then we'll also go over the changes that were made. So the agreement itself, as we mentioned, is a template agreement for the city to use with the carriers who want to place wireless facilities on city-owned poles in the public rights of way. The city currently owns approximately 1,130 of these poles. The main terms of the agreement, or the initial term of the agreement, will expire after 10 years. That will require the $1,000 deposit that we mentioned earlier. And as we talked about last time, we're going to charge an annual rent of $270 per location, which is based on an FCC ruling. If that FCC ruling, which is currently under litigation, is no longer enforceable, then we're immediately going to go to an alternative rent amount of $1,500 per year per location, which will be charged immediately. Now we're quickly going to talk about some of the changes that were made, mostly to address carriers' concerns. As I mentioned earlier tonight, the city has been working in good faith to negotiate this agreement with individual wireless carriers. And as a result of those talks, we did make a few changes, all of which can be seen in the red line version, which is attached to an exhibit to the staff report. A few of the noteworthy changes included having the agreement automatically renew in 5-year intervals, where it originally renewed each year. We also adjusted the alternate rent amount to 3% instead of 4% per year, going up. And finally, we've made multiple changes regarding the notice requirements throughout the agreement. This includes notice that we would give regarding delinquent payments and the need for facility repairs, for example, graffiti, letting them know that there was an issue with the property, among other items. And those are the changes to the MFLA, which is, of course, incorporated into the resolution approving the form of the MFLA. And that is it for the presentation today. I'm happy to answer any questions on this last resolution or the MFLA or anything else that council has. I do see that Ms. Karish has her hand raised though. So I recommend that we let her talk first and then we'll be ready to answer any questions.
Yes.
Thank you. I was just going to clarify one matter with respect to the litigation, but also I'm really upset that Scott said I'm an expert in most aspects of telecommunications law.
She is an expert in all aspects.
I'm really offended by that comment. Just kidding. I was just going to say on the litigation, we mentioned that alternative fee for rent, and there has been a development in that litigation that I obviously forgot to tell Scott about because he would have updated his PowerPoint, but we had petitioned the Supreme Court for review, the US Supreme Court for review of the Ninth Circuit decision, which upheld the costs, and they denied that petition. So the litigation is over, but it is based on an FCC order, so there is always the possibility that the FCC may change their order in the future, or that Congress may, adopt a law or something like that. There is also a bill pending, as we updated you on in the past, pending in the state legislature that would keep that rental rate at $270 as well. So lots of opportunity for things to shift here. So we didn't feel the need to change that language.
Thank you, Ms. Karish. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Okay, if not, I am going to go to public comment. And is there anyone that would like to make any comments at this time? Okay, I will start with Kimbar Katama, please.
Good evening, Mayor O'Brien and members of the City Council. This is Ginbar Katema again with Verizon Wireless. First, I like to extend my gratitude to your staff and your outside consultant, Gail Karish, for the opportunity that was given to us to discuss our concerns on the documents before you this evening. It was a very productive discussion, and we look forward to further discussions like that. With regard to the design and location standards, we feel as though additional revisions are necessary to ensure that the code provides a workable and federally compliant process to make necessary investments required to improve services for the community in Burlingame. And with regard to the license agreement, there are business deal breakers that there are business deal breakers in the form that you're being asked to approve tonight. And on both of these documents, we have shared, in writing with staff and Gail, the concerns that we have. And so, Verizon is asking respectfully council not to adopt the form municipal facility license agreement to again allow us additional time to work through that so that we reach a mutually agreeable form. And I'm available to answer any questions that council might have of me on behalf of Verizon. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen Kame? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Great, thank you. Hello, Mayor O'Brien, Vice Mayor Ortiz, and honorable council members. My name is Ellen Kame. I'm speaking tonight as part of the External and Legislative Affairs team for AT&T. First off, AT&T wants to thank city staff, Assistant City Attorney Spansel, and Ms. Karish for working with us. We support the design guidelines as written tonight, and we appreciate that the MLA would be approved to form. We look forward to further communicating with staff on fine-tuning the MLA, as was mentioned in the staff presentation. AT&T did submit a letter to the city highlighting for staff some of the MLA items that would benefit from further discussion, and have been really heartened by staff's commitment to continue to work through this with us. We're committed to being a partner in the community and with the city, and just want to thank staff again for working with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ellen. Anyone else before I close the public hearing? Okay, I will close the public hearing. To our city clerk, did we get any emails in regards to this item number?
No, we did not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so back to my colleagues. Any comments, questions, motions?
Madam Mayor, sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Brownrigg.
So with respect to the 20 feet, I'd like to ask my colleagues if they'd be willing to see that written in, and then I would make a motion to adopt with that amendment to be included, if that works from the city attorney's point of view. But obviously, first I have to discover whether colleagues would like to see that additional aesthetic protection included. Thank you.
Councilmember Coulson. You want to respond to Councilmember?
Yeah, I just want to ask a follow-on question to that, to Gail, to Ms. Karish and our staff and our legal team, which is my concern about making it prescriptive around the distance and not knowing, what the average house setback is in Burlingame, and just not understanding a lot of the details and exactly how many people and homes that would actually preclude. And also, I'm a little nervous about that, and I'm also a little concerned about, why 20 feet? Why not 25? Why not 30? Why not 10? Why not 5? I just don't feel like I have enough information. So I guess my question is, can we adopt, and if we get data that suggests that a particular distance could work or wouldn't eliminate, and essentially de facto make us non-compliant, could we revise?
So I can certainly take the first part of that, Councilwoman Coulson. I think that is what staff is intending to do with the update in 6 to 9 months and sooner if needed, to determine what's working and what's not, to see what we could include or what we need to get rid of. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about here today. I think another thing to keep in mind is the location preference order that we currently have now is we do require that the applicant include an explanation of the reason that proposed facilities can't be deployed at a higher preference location. And I want to note that we do put non-arterial streets with single unit, 2-unit, multi-unit residential zoning districts very, very low on that preference order. So right now we are asking those carriers to go in those higher preference orders, and they're going to have to show us why they need to go to the area they're going to. So we think that does build in some sort of a safeguard to make sure that we're keeping them in the places where City Council has shown they want them to be. So that's what we're trying to see. And obviously we don't know what we don't know yet. We don't know how the implementation is going to play out, but we felt that this was a good framework to start from and then to build off on future updates.
So then I have a quick question with that. Then can we then keep track, or can we track then the distance that these utilities are being placed, so that when we do review 6 to 9 months from now, that we have that data?
Yes, we can. We will be getting site plans for all of these to make sure that we understand where they are, and the application themselves are going to tell us where they are. So this is going to be the new system that gives us a lot more flexibility and paperwork that can show us where everything is, where our current system doesn't quite give us that same guarantee.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Beach, followed by Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I do appreciate the discussion. I guess I share Councilmember Coulson's concern about being a little bit too prescriptive at this point, and appreciate Assistant City Attorney Spansel's explanation that really staff worked really hard to try to solve for the concerns we had, which we're trying to give as much space and flexibility within kind of the box we have to stay in with federal law and FCC orders. So. And I do like the mayor's idea of tracking where these applications actually land over the next 6 to 8 months, so we can evaluate and see if we can fine tune it. But I think at this point, I'd be inclined to keep the staff recommendation. There's still obviously debate among the carriers that are making public comment here tonight, whether it's workable or whether it's too restrictive. And I think we're walking a really fine line, and we've got a lot of experts, a lot of staff. We have Ms. Karish, who put a lot of time into developing some standards that we think are as workable as they can be, and that'll protect the public interest. So I'm sort of in favor of going with what we've got right now and evaluating over the next 6 to 9 months. Thanks.
So if I may, as my colleagues know, I normally don't debate, but in this case, I'm going to just answer a couple of points and try to make my case. First of all, the 20 feet comes from a neighboring city's ordinance, and therefore I think there is basis for 20 feet being a reasonable standard. Also, practically speaking, most of our front setbacks in Burlingame are, as Director Huron points out, 15 feet or so or more. But the issue for me is that because, and I support this, we want pole top placements. You're now at the top of a pole, which is going to be closest to bedrooms, which typically are on the second floor of Burlingame homes. And I believe that both from an aesthetic point of view and with other considerations in mind, 20 feet puts it far enough away to be very confident that the physical properties of the radio waves are greatly attenuated by the time they get to the home, and that the people in those bedrooms, often children, are therefore doubly protected. I understand that you can do this one of two ways. You can either try it this way and see if you need to become more restrictive, or you can start more restrictive and then see if you need to become less restrictive. In this particular case, I would advocate strongly that we start more restrictive and then we lift if the industry says, sorry, we just can't find places that are more than 20 feet away. for the bulk of these placements. If not, they will inevitably go to the easiest poll, not necessarily. And I'm sorry to be rude. The preference order won't matter. What will matter is what's simplest, because that's what's least expensive. And they have to do a lot of these polls. There are going to be hundreds and hundreds of polls and placements around Burlingame. So I would strongly recommend that we start with a more restrictive regime and have industry come back and say, we can't do that, rather than start with a more open regime and then expect to become more restrictive, which I think is very difficult to do. So that's my plea to my colleagues. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm really having a lot of thinking about this. I'm kind of in the fence, but I am going to follow with staff on this one. And again, we're just considering aesthetics. This is the only thing we're allowed to consider. So I'm struggling with it because I see your points, Councilmember Brownrigg, but I'm going to go with staff on this one. So thank you.
In regard to that, I would actually go with staff's recommendations. And when you look at second story additions, they are set back even further than the first story. So I would say you're getting pretty close to the 20 feet, if not greater than the 20 feet. So I'd rather just monitor for the next 6 to 9 months and let's track it and see where we land from there. And then if it comes to a point that we think we should be changing it, we do have that opportunity. Are there any other comments? Okay, if there isn't, we need to take these resolutions separately. So we can start with the first resolution, which is establishing the design and location standards for the wireless facilities in public right-of-ways. Does someone want to make a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'll make that motion to accept that resolution. Do I need to read the title of it? Is it okay?
That should work.
Are we good with that as assistant? Okay.
So Madam Mayor, you mentioned it. So it's the motion to approve by Councilmember Beach, the resolution establishing design and location standards for wireless facility.
Second.
So motion made by Councilmember Beach, seconded by Vice Mayor Ortiz. Megan, may we have the voice vote there, or actually roll call?
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
No.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, motion passes 4-1. Second resolution, that will be the resolution approving the form of a municipal facility license agreement for small cell wireless facilities installation and authorizing the city manager to execute and amend the agreement. Okay, that's the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion by, before we go forward, Ms. Karish, do you have a comment or?
Yes, I just wanted to answer the question you had asked before about if there is any graffiti. So we did, if you have that standard condition in your conditions, that would apply to all. And just given the variety, it would be basically a code enforcement matter for other facilities. But for your facilities in particular, the light poles, the vote that you're doing now on the agreement, it would be considered, if there were graffiti, that would be considered kind of damage to the facility. And we do have the licensee, the carrier would have to repair the damage, and if they don't, then there is the possibility for the city to do the repair itself and then charge them back. The timeline might be a little bit longer because you'd have to give them notice and an opportunity to cure, but they also are required under the license to comply with your local law and your permit. So that would be the permit conditions as well.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Before we take the vote, Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Forgive me, this motion is about the fee and license structure.
No, this is for the municipal facility license agreement and the city manager's authority to approve and execute it.
Right. So all of the location issues that I have, that was with the last ordinance. This is about the licensing regime with carriers, correct?
This is the agreement that the city makes with the carrier to share our light pole as we have to.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a
Hopefully.
second?
I'll
Yeah, you
second.
got it.
Beach seconds.
Okay, so motion made by Councilmember Coulson, seconded by Councilmember Beach. Megan?
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. On to the third resolution, and that is establishing a deposit for the wireless permit under chapter 12.11 and establishing a fee, the wireless permit appeals under chapter 12-11 and authorizing the finance director to amend the master fee schedule. Councilmember Brownrigg, did you have a comment on that?
No, Madam Mayor, I'm willing to make a motion to approve that regime.
Do we have a second?
Second it.
So we have a motion made by Councilmember Brownrigg, seconded by Vice Mayor Ortiz.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Good night. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Ms. Kirsch. All right, that leads us to item 10C, and this is the adoption of an ordinance amending chapter 15.06 and adopting a new chapter 1507 of the Burlingame Municipal Code to prohibit wasteful water use practices. CEQA determination exempt pursuant to state CEQA guidelines, sections 15378 and 15061B3. And is this Director Matuza?
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Thank you. This would be this would typically be a consent item, but in this case we bring it back to you as a discussion item because the City Council voted 3-2 at the June 21st meeting. Staff is recommending the City Council to adopt the attached ordinance amending chapter 15.06 and to adopt a new chapter 15.07 to prohibit wasteful water practices. Briefly, the 15.06 chapter referenced the water shortage contingency plan to ensure the city has the legal authority to execute water use practices in the plan. And the chapter 15.07 provides the city essentially adopts standards for prohibiting wasteful water practices on a permanent basis and lists all the details of the prohibitions. And the City Council discussed these at the June 21st meeting after introducing the ordinance and after extensive deliberation voted 3-2 with Councilmember Brownrigg and Councilmember Beach opposing and directed staff to bring it back for second reading of the ordinance for today's meeting. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Matuza, for the overview. I know we talked about this extensively at our last City Council meeting. So do we have any questions of staff? Okay, if not, then I will open it up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment on item 10C? Okay, if not, I'll go back actually to Megan. Are there any emails?
No, there are none.
Okay, thank you. So then on that note, colleagues, any comments or move forward with the motion? Councilmember Brown.
Oh, go ahead.
After you.
No, because I was going to go ahead and make a motion to approve
but I know you dissented last time. So if you have a comment, you can add it in.
I appreciate that. I'll make a comment on the motion, but actually I have just one question, and that is, I wasn't clear in the regime that's being proposed if a property is being rented and there's a water fine because they don't have a trigger on their hose or the irrigation system is running. Who pays that fine, the tenant or the landowner?
So thank you, council member. That's a very good question. What typically staff does is staff, before we initiate the fine, we start with the outreach, education, and try to find the reasons what's going on. So we will engage with the tenant, obviously, the first case. And if the tenant were to direct us to the property owner, we would go to the property owner. And we would not be issuing fine until we exhaust all the resources. But technically speaking, if the tenant has is the entity that is on site and responsible for water use, then we would be, the fine would be issued to the tenant.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Okay, that's the only comment. Councilmember Coulson, you were going to
Make a motion. Make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so motion made by Councilmember Coulson, seconded by Vice Mayor Ortiz. Megan? Or actually, I see Councilmember Brownrick has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make a quick comment. I won't repeat ad nauseum my concerns. I will say that I continue to think that the best way to get people to save water is to price water more expensively if more water gets used. I think that's as a general matter, as a sort of philosophy of regulation, that's the best way to send a signal to people. What we do with this, and I do appreciate that we don't plan to be draconian and we're not going to be sending out the water police. But in effect, what this ordinance does is everybody who has a garden hose on their house now has to go out and buy a trigger, a spring-loaded trigger for the hose. And if you don't, you're in breach. Or if your irrigation system is, running and you're away on vacation and it rains, then you're in breach. And I just think this is not the right. I don't think it will make a big difference to water. I'm a huge fan in saving water. It's precious. We shouldn't be watering, fields with potable water. So I think there are a lot of things that this city can do, and Councilwoman Coulson's talked about some of them in the past, that will save a lot more water. I just don't like this approach of telling homeowners that they're basically breaking our rules if they don't have a trigger on their hoses, among other things. So for those reasons, I am not in support of this approach and will be voting against. I just wanted to say that because it's not about saving water for me. It's just about the approach we're taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Although I am assured by staff, they're not here to be punitive, they're here to educate. And that people will have, warnings. And my understanding, this is upon neighborhood or neighbor complaint. So I look at it as an educative process. I think in general, Burlingame is quite mindful in regards to conserving water because they don't want to pay high water bills. So I think they're already abreast to rates and conserving water. And, if we were approaching this in a more punitive manner, then I would agree with you, Councilmember Brownrigg, but I'm pretty well assured by our staff that that is not the approach they want to take. All right. So on that note, the motion was made by Councilmember Coulson, seconded by, was it Vice Mayor Ortiz, correct?
Yes.
All right. So Megan, can you please do the roll call?
Councilmember Beach.
Thank you. I'll just make a brief comment at this time. So I dissented last time around, really with the intent to hopefully hone the language, maybe delay this a month, because in principle, I do support having a regulation like this. Because the majority of the council opted not to change the language and hone in on it, but I do support in principle. I don't know if this is appropriate, but I feel more comfortable voting yes at this point because we've decided not to change the language per majority. But in principle, I do feel like it's an appropriate thing to do. So I will be voting yes, and that is the reason for my different vote this time around. Thank you.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
I'm the cranky guy tonight. No.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, motion passes 4-1. All right, next on our agenda is a discussion regarding the process of reviewing and revising the general fund reserve policy and adoption of a resolution modifying the annual review language in the policy. So Director Augustine?
That's it. That's me. The reason this item was placed on the agenda was the result of some council comments that were made at the budget study session in May about the city's general fund reserve policy. Due to the continued impact of the pandemic economy on the city's reserves, particularly in the most recent fiscal year just ended, the policy, is certainly commanding a bit more scrutiny than it has in prior years. In particular, the council questioned the basis for the policy to be tied to general fund revenues rather than expenditures. So I thought it would be a good time to bring the policy back for review. And then looking at the policy, I realized that the policy itself calls for an annual review. Sort of an oops moment for me to be going out on. But in my defense, general fund reserves, if not the policy, are frequently discussed as part of every budget, and in fact, as part of all major financial discussions brought to the council. So the staff report gives a little bit of background of the general fund reserve policy. It was first developed in fiscal year 14-15. It notes the establishment of the capital investment reserve policy a few years later. But in short, tonight staff is asking for council direction about the policy review. So we don't have to have an in-depth discussion about the policy itself tonight. If the council's satisfied with the review of the city's reserve policy in the context of each fiscal year's budget development, such as the less formal review that has been our practice, then staff recommends that this be clarified by making the wording consistent with the wording in the capital investment reserve policy, which says if changes are deemed necessary, changes to the policy may be authorized by the city council at any time. And I know that's kind of a given that would allow for that flexibility that staff has presumed in the past without really checking the letter of the policy. So, but if a more formal review is desired, then that should be clarified as well in the policy, whether the council wants that review perhaps brought as a separate item to the council at each year's budget study session, or just as on an as-needed basis. It is noted in the staff report that the general fund reserve policy is not the type of policy that should undergo frequent modification, because unlike some other compliance-oriented policies, this is more of a strategy involved. So whatever is decided regarding the policy's review, since the subject matter is now before you, the council might want to take the opportunity to discuss the policy and any concerns you would like to address going forward. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Director Augustine. Do any of my colleagues have questions at this time? Okay, if not, I'm going to open it up to public comment to see if there's any comments from the public. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment. Megan, any emails regarding this item number?
No, there are none.
Okay, now we can have discussion. Colleagues. Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you. So I'm completely satisfied with the proposal that Director Augustine has made here, which is basically documenting the sort of practice that we've had over the last 5-6 years. I've always felt like every year we've sort of looked at that reserve policy, we've made adjustment, we've made suggestions or if there's a problem, but I feel we've done a really good job. We've had a good reserve policy. And I'd be willing to revise the language as stated. I think every year we can take a look at it. And to me, I'm more worried about not having enough of reserve. I'm not too worried about over reserving a little bit right now. So I think the policy as written and revised in the document would suffice, and I'd be happy to go along with that.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Vice Mayor Ortiz followed by Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree with what my colleague just said. Our reserve policy has served us well going through this crisis, and I think that that's something that we need to be really proud of, and we need to maintain that discipline going forward so that if we do run into lean times again, we will be properly reserved. I agree with the changes, and I would support the question here.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you. I've said earlier how much I appreciate Director Augustine's long run vision. And I think that's why one of the reasons we were in such a strong position in this and significant downturn. I think my recommendation from a process point of view, I don't believe we need to review this annually. And in fact, I had forgotten that, but I feel like there's almost a risk if you do it annually that you start taking it for granted. And I don't really care how we turn out on this item tonight, but I actually think from a process point of view, we'd be better off having a deep dive every, say, 3 years than, an annual review. I do think that that in about a year or two, when the travel industry comes back and we can see where TOT revenues are, we'll be able to look back over this period, the pandemic period, and really have a look at how our reserves got hit and have a much better sense of where we need to be from a reserve point of view. I do think that we have had, and I'll just say this, a very significant unassigned fund balance, which has been extremely helpful to managing this downturn. I think there is some risk to relying on that approach. It may be that future finance directors or future councils are less willing to have so much in unofficial reserve, which is effectively what that unassigned fund balance is. I think it's super helpful that we have that, but I think we're also a very responsible group of people. So I do think whenever we do a deeper dive a year, 2, 3 from now, I wonder whether that's the question I have in the back of my mind. It's like, how reliable is that system, which we've been basically using for years? And it's worked, and I appreciate it. It's not exactly regular. So anyway, I appreciate the work, and I stand in support of whatever, the consensus is tonight. I think we're in a good place, so I'm not worried about it.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. I don't have an issue with the annual review. I don't think it hurts to do that. It served us well so far, but I also agree that maybe with Councilmember Brownrigg's suggestion that we do kind of a yearly kind of pass through evaluation and then every 3 years, then do a deeper dive evaluation. So maybe we do kind of that tiered system where it's a lighter review initially, deeper dive every 3 years. That might be able to kind of encompass everyone's concerns, because you get different finance directors, you get different council members, and so they may look at things a little differently than the current council looks at a budget. So I think we kind of entail both ends by doing 2 reviews. Councilmember Coulson.
I might suggest we do the annual review as we have every year with the budget, just as included as part of the budget process. And then maybe once every 3 years, kick over to the audit committee, a deeper dive with the 2 audit committee members and the staff in a more informal meeting setting where we can have a little more discussion, and then we do a report out from that to the full board for the full board's consideration.
I think that sounds like a good idea. I think we have some thumbs up from our colleagues. So everyone in agreement on that? Okay. Director Augustine, you have our direction.
I do, and I took good notes for my successor.
Great. Thanks a lot. All right. So item,
Madam Mayor, we need a motion to pass the resolution on that one.
So moved.
Second.
okay, motion made by, I was actually reading my staff report. Sorry. I know it's seconded by Vice Mayor Ortiz, who made the initial.
Actually, I made the motion.
Okay.
Nice.
You made the
And I seconded.
Okay, so Vice Mayor Ortiz made the motion, seconded by Councilmember Brownrick. Megan.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrick,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes. So the motion passes 5-0. All right, so on to the next item, which is the item 10E, and that's a review of the proposed water and sewer infrastructure capacity charges for new development and redevelopment projects. Is this Director Martuza?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor and Council, again, staff is recommending that the City Council review the proposed water and sewer capacity charges for new development and redevelopment projects and provide direction. I'll make a brief introduction of the subject matter, and I'll have our consultant who's here, Alex Handler, principal at the Bartlewell's company, provide the presentation and answer any questions. Also, I have staff members Kevin Okada and Mahesh Adluri. They are water and sewer capital improvement program engineers, respectively, that they can help answer any questions that related to the capital improvement program. Briefly, water and sewer infrastructure capacity charges are one-time fees paid upfront by developers as part of condition of approvals, primarily designed to recover the cost of capacity in existing water sewer system that benefits the new development. In Burlingame, we don't have water service. We don't have the water infrastructure costs, but most agencies do have that. Regarding sewer, the city does levy sewer capacity charges, but they were developed a long time ago and extremely low compared to other agencies. Staff has been working with Bartlewell's and the utility company, independent utility rate and finance consulting firm to look into this matter and develop basis for capacity charges, and has come up with recommendations for your consideration. With that, I will have Alex, Megan, if you could assign him as a panelist and also give him permission to share the screen, he would be able to do the presentation.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to try to share the screen here. Okay, can folks see this? Is this working? Oh, great. Well, thank you, Syed, and nice to see members of the council. Some I remember from about 5 years ago we were there, but I'm just going to give kind of a quick rundown. I think Syed just gave you a nice brief summary there. First, a little background on who I am and our firm is. I'm Alex Handlers with Bartlewell's Associates. We are an independent rate and financial consulting firm that's been working in California since the 1960s. We've worked for over 500 agencies around California. I've probably worked for about 150 agencies, including a lot in the Bay Area, and worked on the city's water rates about 5 years ago. But tonight we're talking about capacity charges. I'll give you a quick background, talk about how we developed the new fees, and show you some fee comparisons to other agencies. And I think Syed already kind of defined this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, These are it's kind of a one-time charge that a new connection would pay to connect to the water and sewer systems. The government code calls them capacity charges because really what's happening is the new connection is buying in for its share of capacity in your water and sewer system infrastructure. A lot of times these fees get called connection fees, or it's a type of development impact fee. The key is it's paid by developers, not by ratepayers. And it's nice if you can have these fees because it's a source of revenue that is going to offset the revenues that ratepayers would otherwise have to pay. And the goal is obviously growth pays its own way. As Syed also mentioned, you don't have any water capacity fees at the moment. You do have a sewer connection fee, but it's less than $300 per single family home. So this study was meant to come up with new fees that are in line with industry standards, meet all the legal requirements, and result in the fees recovering costs for the cost of infrastructure that benefits new development. For the legal framework, water and sewer capacity charges are governed by California Government Code Section 66013, which is separate from other portions of the Mitigation Fee Act. Really, the key provisions are sort of vague, but implies that the fee cannot exceed the estimated reasonable cost of providing the service for which the fee is imposed. And you could recover costs for public facilities that are already in existence or future facilities needed to benefit growth. The government code doesn't specify any methodology, but it does require that the revenues be kept separate from other water and sewer utility revenues, and the city already does this. So the approach we used is pretty straightforward. It's one we use a lot for agencies that are largely built out like Burlingame. I call it an average buy-in approach. And the approach really just takes all the cost and value of your existing facilities and divides it by the capacity or the usage that those facilities are going to serve through build out to come up with an underlying unit charge that is then applied to the water and wastewater demand characteristics of each type of new connection. So everyone's buying in for their proportionate share of costs is the theory. And when we did that for the water infrastructure, we came up with a total water system cost recovery of almost $187 million. We think that's a conservative estimate. We used conservatively low estimates of the costs of pipelines and water storage facilities on your water side. To be conservative, we also factored in a 75% cost recovery factor to make sure that the estimates we were coming up with were very defensible and don't exceed the estimated reasonable cost per the government code. And we also backed out outstanding principal. You have a few bonds that are funding some water system facilities. Some of the principal has not been paid, so we didn't think it was fair to include that in the cost recovery, which is pretty common. So we come up with that total cost, and we're dividing by the total water system demand that the water system is going to serve through build out. And for that, we use the best information we had that's available, which came from your 2015 Urban Water Management Plan, which implies there'll be almost 2,000 million gallons per year of potable water demand through build out in 2040. So cost divided by capacity works out to a little less than $35 per gallon per day. And then we apply that to the water demand characteristics of different types of customers based on analyzing your water use data from the 2017-18 and fiscal year 2018-19. We avoided some of the data from this past year due to anomalies due to COVID-19, a lot of people working from home. And this slide shows the charges. The top half of the slide in light blue shows the residential capacity charges. Now those we're recommending that they get recovered based on the number of dwelling units and the type of dwelling unit. So for example, a single family home, the fee would equal a little less than $6,500 per dwelling unit. We also came up with some reduced charges for different types of smaller multifamily dwelling units that tend to use less water. And there's a separate charge also for an accessory dwelling unit. Why do we have to separate accessory dwelling units? Well, there's some new government regulations that the city's already been responding to that say if it's an accessory dwelling unit, if it's within the existing living area of a single family home, if someone turns their garage and basement into a unit, you're not allowed to charge them a capacity charge. The government's trying to encourage more of these accessory dwelling units. At the same time, if it is a new accessory dwelling unit that's built, is detached from the home, or it requires more than 150 feet expansion, well, then you're allowed to levy a charge, but it has to be based on square footage or plumbing fixture units according to the government code. So we came up with a charge per square foot to make sure you're complying. So that's the residential water capacity charges. On the non-residential side, we're recommending charges based on water meter size, which is the best proxy for water demand that we know of. This is also the most common way it's done in the industry. And here you can see the charges are higher for folks who have larger meter sizes. And those charges for the larger meter sizes are in proportion to the higher capacity that those meters have in comparison to the base 5/8 inch meter. So for example, a 2-inch meter has 8 times the capacity of a 5/8 inch meter. So the fee is correspondingly 8 times as high. Moving on to the sewer side, same approach. We came up with a sewer system valuation of about 226 million. It's a little higher than the water system because it includes not only the collection system, pipelines, and lift stations, but you also have a wastewater treatment facility. Again, we use the 75% cost recovery factor to be reasonable, in recognition that we're just using cost estimates here and want this to be as defensible as possible. On the wastewater side, not only do we back out the principal of outstanding debt, but there's also a small portion of capacity that gets used by Hillsborough and Burlingame Hills Sewer Maintenance District. So we backed out those costs as well to make sure we're only looking at really the city's cost of facilities. And there we're dividing by the new projected sewer system demand that's come out of your new sewer system master plan, which projects that, through build out, you're going to have about 2.7 million gallons per day of wastewater demand. So again, the cost divided by capacity, works out to $84 and change per gallon per day, which we then apply against the sewer demands of different customer types. We're using the same proposed methodology. This table here shows the residential charges on top. The charge for a single family home is a little over 9,800. The multifamily charges again are less, depending on what type of multifamily unit it is. And again, the accessory dwelling unit, $4.10 per square foot. On the non-residential side, the same thing, the capacity charges, what we think is the best proxy for sewer demand is the water meter size. So we have charges based, on water meter size in proportion to meter capacity, which also is a reasonable, estimate of the proportionate level of demand that these customers are putting on the system and the amount of infrastructure that they're going to need for both water and sewer. This chart here, just reminding folks that these capacity charges not only apply to a brand new connection to your system, but also if it's a redevelopment project that's requiring upsizing the water meter. For example, if it's a warehouse that's being replaced by a mixed use, commercial residential development, if the meter size is going to from a 1-inch meter, now they need a 2-inch meter, they would only be responsible for paying the increase in the charge from the 1-inch to the 2-inch meter. So the existing capacity is sort of grandfathered in for the current property. And also pointing out that there would be no capacity charges levied for residential remodeling projects or additions, because we have standard charges for a single family home. If they're going to add a bedroom and a bathroom, there's no incremental charge. However, I do want to point out that, whenever we make these charges, it's based on certain standard estimates of what the demand is for a typical family home, what typical demand is for different commercial meter sizes. So these proposed charges really are standard charges. You may have some unique cases that happen on rare occasion in the future, that there's a new connection that's outside the standards. An example could be if instead of, a new home's going in on a 10-acre lot, and it's going to be 20,000 square feet with all sorts of water fountains everywhere. Well, in such a case, the standard single-family home wouldn't necessarily apply. So we always think it's good for the city to have the authority to come up with these unique charges on a case-by-case basis, which will be very rare, but you should always retain that authority. And the final point being that the city already does this, that these fees should be adjusted every year to keep up with construction cost inflation and keep the fees from falling behind the cost of facilities. So the city's already been doing that with its existing sewer connection fees. So that's something that's easy to maintain going forward. The next set of slides shows a regional fee survey. Everyone always wants to know how they compare with their surrounding agencies. So the stars on this map show the other agencies that we're comparing to. The first survey is for single family homes. I'll point out Burlingame has no water capacity charge, so your current charge is 0. The proposed charge for single family homes is kind of in the lower middle range. We look at the sewer charges here. Your current fee, I think it was just recently updated on July 1, so it might be a little higher than $282 per home, but still it's very close to 0. And here the proposed charge, you can see, is a little higher than the median, but still within the middle range. And you put them both together, here's how your combined charges stack up against a lot of the surrounding communities. You're right in the middle of the pack. We also made some surveys for multifamily dwelling unit, understanding that some of the maybe significant development that's going to happen in Burlingame in the future might be larger multifamily buildings going in, including, I think there's one underway right now. So here's a survey of a multifamily unit with 2 bedrooms or more. And again, you have no water capacity charges, but the proposed multifamily charge is, again, in the middle range, a little higher than median. On the sewer side, kind of same story as the single family. Again, the charge is in the middle range, a little bit higher than median for what's being proposed. And you put them both together, no surprise, the charge is in the middle range, but a little higher than the median for the multifamily. So both your single family and multifamily proposed charges are kind of in that middle range. So that kind of concludes what I was going to cover here. And the next steps in this process would be to get council's input and direction. And before these charges could be adopted, a resolution would have to be drafted, brought back for council consideration. And the only things you have to be concerned of, other than the city's own legal process, is that according to Government Code 66016, that applies to water and sewer capacity charges, you'd have to hold a public hearing and you'd have to mail notice of the future public hearing at least 14 days in advance. But this only goes out to folks who have filed a written request with the city to receive such information. This is nothing like a Prop 218 process. But if all that happens, the plan would be to come back sometime in the next upcoming months with final ordinances or resolutions embodying the proposed fees. So that kind of covers my presentation on this. I'll turn it back over to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Handlers. I will start out with questions. I do have one. Are there any instances where you may incorporate a different rate if it's a certain percentage of affordable housing?
That's a very good question. And I would defer to your legal counsel if the city wanted to give a reduced charge for affordable housing. I have seen some cities on certain occasions want to reduce the charge for certain types of customers. For example, Union Sanitary District over in the East Bay used to have a reduced fee because they wanted to encourage restaurants and not have such a high fee for those customers. So I do think it's possible, but different attorneys have different opinions on this. So I would defer to the city's legal counsel.
Thank you. Councilmember Beach, followed by Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to ask a question. And thank you for the presentation and the justification, Mr. Handlers. Just to make sure I understand what happens in single family renovations, I thought I understood something different from reading the draft report versus what I heard, but maybe I just misinterpreted. So let's say a single family home is doing a major renovation, but doesn't increase bedroom size. But sometimes that does trigger a larger meter size. It might have to go from like a, whatever, a 3/4 to a 1 inch, which happens in renovations. Does that mean they would be subject, single family homes would be subject to this difference? Can you just explain how that would work with renovations again?
Yeah, no, you bet. That's a good question. The single family, the residential charges that are being applied are per dwelling unit. So, it doesn't matter if a single family home expands and increases, there's new fire flow requirements. So a lot of times a new home does a significant remodeling project. Even sometimes they have to go from a 3/4 to a 1 inch meter. But on the residential side, there would be no increase in charge because it's a standard charge per single family home. It's only on the commercial side when there's a significant increase in a redevelopment project. They're going from a 1 inch meter to a 4 inch meter. They'd only have to apply the incremental difference. But on the residential side, you had no additional charges for remodeling or even expansions.
Thank you for clarifying that. So it's really if a single family home doesn't exist somewhere right now and a new single family home is constructed out of an empty lot, that's where these single family homes charges would apply. Correct. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate both of the last inputs. I very much value and appreciate your question, Madam Mayor, about whether we can set up a preference for affordable units. I would certainly stand in favor of that. And I also appreciate Councilwoman Beach's clarification because that isn't how I read it. I thought anytime your meter size went up, and the fact is, if you require sprinklers, which we do in almost any new remodel, it requires a larger meter. So, but just to really be sure, you're saying it doesn't matter if it's a renovation and you have to put in a bigger meter, we're not going to charge you more. It's only from ground up new construction is what you just said, right?
That's correct. And when I'm going to take another look at the report and make sure we make that very clear.
All right, I appreciate that. Since I have the mic, the last comment I'll make is when this comes back, as I'm sure it will, and it should, and I appreciate, being sort of in the middle of the pack. I think that's a good place to be. Nevertheless, I would like staff to assess these fees in conjunction with all the other fees. I think it's important for policymakers to not approve fees one by one, but to see the global impact on the cost of development. I'm sure that we will still think this is a worthwhile fee and it's fair and all the rest of it. But I just think for our sake as policymakers, we need to see the global context of the fee structure that we're creating. So appreciate that and thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to add my voice to support your question about the affordable housing. I think that's a really important change that we can make. I also like Councilmember Brownrigg's idea of looking at the whole cost of development. I think that's important when we make these decisions. And I also agree that we're not probably going to change this, but I think it's important to look at it in that context. So yes, great thoughts. You guys are all brilliant.
Okay, any other questions or comments before I go to public comment? Okay, it doesn't look like it, so I will open up to public comment. Would anyone like to make a comment on this item? Okay, if not, I'll close public comment. Megan, have we received any emails pertaining to this item?
No, we have not.
Thank you. Okay, so we've given direction. Sayad, do you need anything else from us?
Madam Mayor, thank you for the direction. I captured the 2 points. One is the council is interested in moving forward, and the second thing is council is would like staff to look into the affordable, some sort of concession or discount or some sort of a mechanism to incentivize affordable housing. Right, and if you have any suggestions, any sort of, we can certainly look at that and come back. You know, I would just wanted to know if there's any particular idea you may have that you would like us to look into.
Councilmember Brownrigg.
So I think there are two possibilities, Director Martusa, that suggest themselves, at least to me. One, you could do, so first of all, we're really mostly talking about multifamily buildings. And so one could either waive or give a significant discount to any of the charges on a unit that is going to be deed restricted affordable. So basically just waive the fee for that deed restricted affordable unit, or alternatively, since some of them are required by our regulations, we could go over and above the minimum requirement. So if you are above the minimum requirement for affordable units, then there is a discount on a percentage basis overall in ratio to whatever you are. I think one way or another, you want to encourage incremental increases in affordability, not just give people a waiver for doing something they have to do anyway.
I would agree with that. That's what I had in mind. Councilmember Brownrigg, is if they go beyond the minimum requirement that we have. Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you. So first of all, I might suggest we look at other cities and see what they're doing. That might be a good structure that's already in place somewhere in another city and see what they're doing. The only concern I have about sort of going up above and beyond is that the affordable housing developers, when we saw our nexus study and our feasibility study, we already learned that, those numbers are sort of barely penciling. And I think rents have actually kind of come down a little bit. So I just want to make sure that if we add this pretty significant layer of fees on, we don't knock those units. Then the developer says, because we've never really said, then all of a sudden the developer goes, well, okay, I can still do them affordable, but I'm going to move them up to moderate, when we really want to try to get deeper levels of affordability. So I'd love to hear just a little more analysis from maybe Director Gardner or someone on that side of the equation to find out if it is still feasible on some of these units. Maybe talk to a couple of our developers. I'm not opposed to it. I just want to understand the economics of it.
Thank you. That is very helpful. Great comments. We will take this feedback. Any other feedback that you may have? Otherwise, I'll wrap this up and work on this thing, and we'll bring it back to you sometime in August or early September.
Great, thank you, Director Martusa. All right, on to our last item, consideration of a market and economic study for downtown Burlingame. Is it Director Gardner with this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor O'Brien. This item is regarding a proposal to prepare a market and economic study for downtown Burlingame. The economic study that underpins the downtown specific plan currently was prepared in 2006. Given the time since then and the development that has occurred or will be occurring, there has been interest in having a more current evaluation of market conditions. The proposal was first discussed at the June 9th, 2021 Economic Development Subcommittee meeting with Vice Mayor Ortiz and Councilmember Brownrigg. The suggestion was to bring the item to the full City Council for discussion. As mentioned in the staff report, an economic study has already been arranged for the Broadway Commercial District as part of a specific plan. That plan is funded through an ABAG MTC Priority Development Area grant. However, funding for a downtown economic study has not been identified, so resources would need to be allocated if this were to move forward. Preliminary discussions with the consultants and colleagues in other cities suggests the cost could be in the range of $50,000 to $75,000, depending on the level of economic analysis and the evaluation of impacts. So this is basically just a short overview of this item. Economic Development and Housing Specialist Joe Sanfilippo is also here in attendance, and both of us are available for questions.
Thank you, Director Gardner. I did have a question on this. So I can see why the Economic Development Subcommittee would want to do this. I'm a little concerned about timing due to the fact we are, just kind of transitioning out of COVID pandemic. There's still a little bit uncertainty futuristically, and we are in a recovery phase. So how accurate will the information be, first of all? Do we wait a little bit longer, or by the time maybe we do the RFP and so forth, that time has already passed and it might be good timing. The other thing I would like to know in this is that I want to know how many vacancies in the Broadway district, how many in the Burlingame Avenue or downtown district. So we have a number that we're working upon. I just don't want to be too short-sighted on this issue if we move forward with this economic development study. Any other questions from colleagues? Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. And I appreciate the Economic Development Subcommittee bringing this idea up. I think it's probably a really good long-range strategy to look at in light of some recent agenda items we had about different uses and all that makes good sense. I do have another question on timing, I guess two related. One that's I'm always mindful of. We've kind of talked a long-term vision of revisiting a comprehensive downtown parking study. Our last one was about 10 years old, and I remember we wanted to look at the effects of the parking garage and certainly come out of COVID. But it seems like any conversation with land use and development is certainly related in some way, shape, or form with how we manage our parking assets and how parking incentives or parking can incentivize or disincentivize certain kinds of development. So I'd just like staff's thought on what's the appropriate timing. Is there synergy or for doing something like this together or separate, or chicken and egg? Is one should come first, one should come second? I'd welcome some expert thoughts on that.
Sure, it can be quite iterative, and Director Mortuza and I did have a chance to discuss this prior to the meeting as the question was presented to us earlier. So part of it depends on the objectives of both the parking study and the economic study. A parking study, if it were to be held today, for example, or in a year or so, would be looking at most likely the how well is parking working for the current uses. Is it convenient? Is it effective? Is it well located? Is there enough for the demand? If the desire for an economic study were to look at future developments, such as is there more market for building additional office space or more housing, then that's new parking demand. And then you would want a parking study that would also determine, is there sufficient capacity in the existing system, or would additional resources need to be built? So the two are very much interrelated, and part of it for each study is the objective to kind of fine tune current existing conditions, or is it to look at some sort of future change which would have implications, and but both inform each other. So that's it is a bit of a chicken and the egg, but they are interrelated. And when the downtown specific plan was put together, there was both a parking study and an economic development study. Concurrently, there had been parking studies prior to that with primarily the objective to make best use of existing resources. And then they came together in the downtown plan to look at how they really play off of each other.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gardner, and I don't pretend to know the answers either, but I think us being really thoughtful about it or doing something in tandem could potentially make a lot of sense. And then these things get expensive. So then, what grant opportunities are there out there where we can, if there are, to help us fund some of these things as well. But thank you for answering that question.
Anyone else? Okay, is that enough direction, Director Gardner?
So I guess
Open this up to public comment too.
Sure.
Let me do that first, and then I'll come back. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make a comment on this item? Okay, Megan, anyone send an email? Oops.
No, I
Anyone
haven't.
send an email?
Nope.
Okay. So Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I thought your question is a really good one. If I can't remember if this requires a motion, but if it did, the way I might construct it is to leave it in staff's judgment as to when to commence. You're absolutely right. We're at the end of a black swan event, and you don't want to plan around that. On the other hand, I think maybe we will be coming out by the time, government moves so slowly, and then the process of research. So I'd be comfortable letting staff kind of optimize that timing. I think your question's a good one. I do want to point out that the other two factors that we talked about on the economic subcommittee is, one, the post office redevelopment has now soaked up all of the office space that we approved in our downtown plan. So I think it is timely to ask the questions that Director Gardner floated. Do we need more housing? Is there more market for housing? Is there more market for office space? And in addition, I think the creation of the town square, which now seems pretty certain, is another factor that would drive an economic review and how that will impact our changing downtown. I think much for the better, but having expert advice at this point struck us as useful as we try to navigate and make sense of the new environment. So that's why we brought this forward. But thank you for hosting it.
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you to Councilmember Brownrigg. Everything he said makes a lot of sense. And it really, when we deal with some of the issues regarding downtown, it feels like we're flying blind because we really don't have the answers, and we don't really have the expert advice on how to handle some of these issues. So I think that's what this would provide. I do see your point, Madam Mayor, about the what the results would be right now based on the current economic conditions. And I'm not against waiting for a couple of reasons. Number one, we do have expenses that we didn't foresee. And so it'd be good to push this off a little bit. Secondly, I think it'll give time for the recovery to take hold and we get some better numbers. And thirdly, it gives the staff the opportunity to look for other funding opportunities, some grants to maybe help fund the project. I think we need to do it. I don't think we need to rush into it. And so I would be in favor of slowing the process down a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So I think Director Gardner, you've been given direction, and it sounds like, do we have the majority of my colleagues agree on maybe leaving it up to staff to kind of determine the time factor? Okay, good. All right. So I think we're good with that item number. So that leads us to council committee and activities reports and announcements. Are there any from my colleagues? Okay. Future agenda items. Councilmember Brownrigg.
A suggestion and a question, Madam Mayor. My suggestion is, I know we've talked about this in the past, but I'd actually like to request that we agendize the question of whether the Beautification Commission should be formally expanded to include art and public art as part of its remit. I think there are more and more opportunities for public art. I was struck. I walk Facebook's campus a lot. I think, I think it's a very nice contribution. I think it really makes a difference. And so I'd like to suggest that we make this official. So that's an agenda item. I don't know if there's a second for seeing if we can make that official. But anyway, before we see if there's a second, my question is this question that's come up a couple of times about cooling centers in advance of a potentially hot summer. I don't know whether that needs to be agendized or if staff could simply maybe write a report that, do we have plans for that? I'd be certainly content just to hear a report on that rather than agendize it, or read a report on it rather than agendize it per se. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So we have two issues. So let's address each one. So the first being, is there a second to putting on a future agenda item to add potential members to our Beautification Commission to address art?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, whether or not we need additional mayors, I'm not sure, but actually to formally expand the mandate of the commission to be more than just trees. Yeah.
Do you have a second on that?
I'd second that one. That is worthy of conversation.
Okay, so then that can be placed on a future agenda item.
Madam Mayor, just a comment on that. Maybe would anybody consider just a broader question for staff, or where should public art fall? Perhaps it's beautification, parks, perhaps it's something else, a separate. Maybe the broader question of if it is the council's intent, where does it belong?
I'm content
I
with.
think that's part of the discussion item.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. But
I don't know that it has to be for Councilmember Brownrigg. It doesn't have to necessarily be to expand the particular commission. It could just be an exploration of where and how we would address the point of public art.
Thanks. That's what I was trying to suggest. As I thought I heard it was just a beautification.
Yeah, and I would support that broader approach.
Okay.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Councilmember Brownrigg?
I am. We'll have a conversation and sort out the best way to do it. What concerns me is to move beyond this sort of ad hoc system we have now. But anyway, yes, the short answer is yes.
All right, so it'll be a little more of a generalized conversation, but then we can figure out then the specifics from them. All right, then on our second question, cooling systems.
I think the city manager Goldman.
Yeah, that's where I'm going, because I know she wants to talk about the cooling systems.
Cooling centers. So actually, thanks to our city librarian, Brad McCulley, he is working on a plan for the library to be a cooling center. The new community center will also be a cooling center, but right now it's a no center because it's still under construction, but that will be a place we can use in the future. But right now he is working on something for a library. So that's it.
Do we have a time frame with that?
So he's just kind of putting the finishing touches and asking all the relevant questions of people who have experience of this. So I would say before you come back from your recess, we'll get you something in writing. I do not think we need to bring it back as a formal council item. I think we can handle it offline.
So if that is the case, once that is determined, is that something we can put in our e-news and make sure it's published and through our library?
Yep.
And Park and Rec? Okay, perfect.
That's terrific. Thank you.
All right, so then that leads us to acknowledgements. I do have one acknowledgement, but do any of my colleagues have any? Anyone? Okay, so I wanted to mention that the Park and Rec Department lost a special instructor, George Dumondon. He taught basic drawing and beginning watercolors for the department since 2014. George lived in Burlingame and was a member of the Burlingame Art Society. His other accomplishments included getting a private pilot's license and achieving a black belt in karate. George had a constant smile and will be missed by his family and the Burlingame Parks and Recreation team. So on that note, let's close in his honor. Okay, to let the public know, we have canceled our July 19th meeting and also our August 2nd meeting. So we will resume our council meetings on the 16th of August. And at that time, we will still be utilizing Zoom. On that note, good night.